Hello, my name is Mateo Colson, and in this video, I'm going to be telling you about my immersion trip to Chile, a country in South America. I applied to this immersion trip in April because I was intrigued by the opportunity to travel to another part of the world and learn about the history, politics, and culture of another country and region, all while practicing my Spanish as well as building friendships and relationships with my classmates along the way. And now that I have finished the immersion trip, I can thankfully say that it did all of that and even more. And that's why I'm here to share with you all of the lessons I learned along the way. Upon arriving at our hostel, which pleasantly surprised me because of how nice the rooms were, like, oh my gosh, shout out to the Ignatian Center back at Santa Clara. They did a really good job picking the place we were going to stay at. But anyway, to get started with the itinerary of our trip, we made our way to La Universidad de Alberto Hurtado, which is the Jesuit University of Santiago, Chile. And oh my gosh, this school was amazing. The architecture was beautiful, the students I talked to were nice, and it also had a really cute chapel which, while small, as a devout Catholic, I really appreciate it for providing a comfortable space to pray. I also really like this mural, which helped illustrate how important assembly, protests, and demonstrations are in the history of Chile. In addition, I also really liked the cafeteria we would go to many mornings to hear our itinerary for the day. I thought it was not only very beautiful, but it had good food too. We also had to take some classes, and I loved walking in between them. This is because we would meet some cool people. For example, the friends we made during lunch, and the freaking communist candidate for president. She was really nice. Now let's talk about the classes. While I can't share that much about the teachers due to privacy reasons, let me be clear, they were all amazing. I really enjoyed taking their classes on a variety of topics, such as the history of Chile, especially the 1973 coup overthrow of the government, as well as learning about the history of songs, literature, and music in the country. One interesting teacher told me about a topic I've never even heard of as it relates to Chile, ethnomusicology. While in Chile, we walked throughout the capital Santiago and saw many important and historic sites and buildings. To name a few, we saw the building of the Chilean Legislative Congress, the Torre Entel Communications Tower, the country's flagship school, the University of Chile, and even the building of the Supreme Court of Chile, El Palacio de los Tribunales de Justicia. But by far, visiting the La Moneda Palace, which is where the Chilean president works, definitely stayed with me the most out of all the sites I saw from my experience. For me, it felt very jarring to be in the presence of a site that was the location of a violent coup government overthrow on September 11th, 1973. It ended up being the start of a new era for Chile under dictator Augusto Pinochet, who ruled with an iron fist of fear, crime, and many human rights violations. On a related note, visiting the La Moneda Presidential Palace reminded me of how weird I felt after visiting the US Capitol in 2022, 1 year after the violent January 6th United States Capitol insurrection in 2021. After that, on a much lighter note, we then went to go visit La Academia de Bellas Artes, or the Chilean National Museum of Fine Arts, and I loved it. But I'm gonna let the beauty speak for itself in this montage. Now I want to talk about the site that affected me the most emotionally during our trip, which was our group's visit to the National Stadium. 52 years ago, it was used as a detention center, with reportedly over 40,000 people being detained there in the facility in 1973. Here, I am at the former location of the swimming pool, and this area is significant because between September 11th and November 7th, 1973, the women were imprisoned here in the swimming pool changing rooms and its associated buildings. Specifically, these locker rooms and corridors were all used to facilitate the prisoners, while all the women you see here on this wall were interrogated out in the arena of the stadium. I remember feeling lots of shock and despair once it said in how many different women's lives were affected. Many of them were grandmothers, mothers, daughters, sisters, and they all suffered a blatant attack on their human rights and dignity. We then went to go visit the stadium field and gallery and bathroom, which were used to hold the men. The conditions here were terrible, with poor plumbing and a very terribly maintained atmosphere that made it very easy to get sick. And we can even see some former gunshot marks were left behind as evidence of the military abuse that was seen here. The stadium had renovated to include a small museum that showed many pictures with descriptions of what happened to the prisoners while held here in the stadium, and here are some of my favorite photos. The ones that affected me the most were the ones that showed executions of prisoners held here. In addition, one thing that surprised me was that as an American, I was surprised but saddened to find out that 10 Americans were imprisoned here. After exploring the gallery, one thing I was surprised but appreciated upon learning was that in 2011, Chile dedicated a section of the stadium, an area of old wooden bleachers known as Escotilla 8, to commemorate the prisoners which were once detained here. The site is enclosed by a barbed wire fence, but features an appropriate sign that says, "Un pueblo sin memoria es un pueblo sin futuro." Another day, we went to go visit the coast of Chile, specifically the major city of Valparaiso and Viña del Mar, a smaller city that borders Valparaiso. Upon visiting the city, the building I liked the most was definitely this one, which is called El Edificio Armada de Chile, which is a building that is based on French architecture style. And it's also been the site of many historic and social events past and present. But anyway, we then made our way to the port of Valparaiso and got ready to board a boat to tour the harbor.
We are gonna board this boat, right? Never mind. This is the boat we are going on.
I had a blast going on the harbor tour. It was really cool seeing all of the Navy battleships, and I really enjoyed listening to the captain talk about the history of the harbor and its importance both historically and in present times. And did I mention the views were beautiful? Like, oh my gosh, I did not realize Valparaiso was such a beautiful city. But definitely the highlight was this guy, our friend as the captain called him, who stank, but nonetheless he was very cute to look at. But yeah, we soaked in the views of this beautiful harbor tour, and we got to see some really big ships. Like seriously, I forgot how big these things can get. So then, after getting off the boat, we then made our way back to the French Edificio Armada building I talked about earlier, which had a marketplace going on. And while most of the knickknacks didn't stand out to me, for better or worse, one did.
So these things are called Indio Picaros. They're from Chile and they have a little trick to them.
It turns out these things are part of their culture, and they take a lot of pride in how big they can get.
It's disgusting!
Because much of Valparaiso is built on steep hills, we had to ride the city's unusual system of funicular lifts to get to the top of them. But it was only after researching while editing this video that I realized how important they are. According to the World Monuments Fund, they're one of the world's 100 most endangered historical treasures, so I'm that much more grateful to have ridden them. We then walked through much of the Valparaiso cityscape. The city is nicknamed the Jewel of the Pacific, and it's easy to see why due to its unique architecture and quirky urban layout. I hate to sound like an advertiser, but as you can see, the city is full of a lot of winding streets and weird cobblestone alleyways that really show off the unique, colorful houses, history, and culture of Valparaiso, along with lots and lots of art. One of the coolest art pieces I saw depicted my favorite scene from one of my favorite movies.
Here's Johnny!
Next, we went to go eat dinner at the Club Arabe restaurant. And while this isn't super relevant to the rest of the vlog, the reason why I feel so compelled to include this is because right next to the restaurant there was the Sheraton Hotel. And this hotel is significant to me because 10 years ago, I actually stayed at this exact same hotel when I went to go visit Valparaiso with my family.
So I just touched the water and it honestly didn't feel that bad. It felt pretty warm. If I had my swimsuit, I would honestly probably go in.
The next day, we decided to walk towards the Plaza de Armas, which is the main square plaza of Santiago. Surrounding the square plaza are many historic and significant buildings, such as the post office and many statues and monuments. However, it was only one building that captured my attention more than anything.
That's the Municipal Cathedral of Santiago, which is basically the national cathedral because of how grand and aesthetic it is, and through the fact that Chile's former dictator Augusto Pinochet would go there every week to go hear the bishop's homily.
The cathedral was very beautiful and very big. It has many chapels and sides and lots of very nice art pieces, such as these amazing sculptures. But it's also significant because it contains the remains of Bernardo O'Higgins, who was the leader who freed Chile from Spanish rule in the Chilean War of Independence. Anyway, here's a statue of the founder of Santiago, Pedro de Valdivia.
Check that out, you got the cathedral, the statue, and the little Santiago sign where I took a really nice photo earlier.
We then decided to climb up Cerro Santa Lucia Hill, which is a small hill in the center of Santiago that offers a lot of great sightseeing views. After climbing up 226 feet, we made our way up to the highest point that was very easy to see why the viewpoint there was very popular, since it offered many stunning views of this gorgeous city with beautiful mountains and beautiful buildings and beautiful people. After that, we then made our way to Londres 38, or Londres 38, which is a building that was used by the National Intelligence Directorate as a detention and torture center for the opponents of Augusto Pinochet's dictatorship. Nowadays, the facility is surrounded by an outdoor mall/farmers market. And while there are many tribute signs on the ground dedicated to honoring the many victims who were tortured at this detention center, in many ways, I found it quite beautiful how a location that historically used to cause a lot of pain and suffering for many people is nowadays causing a lot of joy for many consumers and a lot of success for many businesses. Later, we went to go visit El Museo de la Memoria y los Derechos Humanos, which is a museum dedicated to commemorating the memory and the human rights violations of the victims of the military dictatorship under Augusto Pinochet. Visiting here was a very powerful experience, as it allowed us to explore human rights from both a historical and contemporary perspective. This shot you see right here has stuck with me for a while because it shows the tools and the diagrams used to try and see how to best torture prisoners, which I find sick. And these papers right here are letters to family members by the prisoners who were tortured in the detention centers. A fact that becomes even more saddening once you realize how many people were tortured or disappeared as a result of this dictatorship. In fact, you learn on this tour that the effects of the dictatorship were so widespread that basically every family in Chile knew someone who was hurt by it. And as a result, it makes it easy to see why past political violence causes ongoing social consequences of anxiety and fear in the country's journey from a dictatorship to a democracy, while also trying to seek reparations and guarantees of non-repetition. The next day, we volunteered at Hogar de Cristo, which is a Chilean charity created by Saint Alberto Hurtado, the namesake of the university mentioned earlier. Today, this foundation serves more than 25,000 people in extreme poverty all around Chile. And today, we did our part by serving breakfast and coffee at this station, and through having some nice conversations where we shared experiences and did some cultural exchanges, I felt like I succeeded in feeling like I was one with them in their community, which was one of the goals of this immersion experience. And later, we listened to some beautiful music and danced with them, which, after seeing the smiles on their faces, made this entire experience worth it once I saw how happy we were making them, and how happy I felt too. I also want to briefly mention that we went to go visit the tomb of Saint Alberto Hurtado. I thought it was really cool seeing his shrine in the little chapel, and while there, I did a quick prayer giving thanks for the trip so far. We then went back to the university to take a cooking class on how to make sopaipillas, which is a Chilean donut. I thought it was really cool to watch, especially when my friends got to cut the donuts into shapes we liked. But it was definitely a lot more fun when I got to participate in the process myself. I definitely made some mistakes, but it was very gratifying to learn something new and become more comfortable in the kitchen, especially once I realized how beautifully tasty the end product would be. Particularly with egg, I highly recommend you try eating this dish one day. It was delicious.
Muchas gracias.
Alright, so the final thing I want to talk about was my group's trip to the Gran Torre Costanera Tower, which is a 62-story skyscraper that is the tallest building in South America. Even though my fear of heights scared me in the elevator, once we reached the observation deck, I was stunned by the view. While up there, it certainly felt like I was one with the clouds as I looked down at the panoramic view of the whole city and the Andes Mountains. In many ways, I thought it was quite fitting that we chose to visit the tower as our final itinerary action item of our trip to Chile, because it provided a kind of big picture ending to our trip. After spending time exploring Chile's neighborhoods, history, and its culture up close, finishing with a bird's eye perspective really ties everything together. It's both a literal and a symbolic way to reflect on what we've seen and to take in the city one last time in its entirety before leaving.